Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so we left off yesterday talking about oil and coke. So oil cokes at 575 degrees Fahrenheit or 300 degrees Celsius. Those are numbers that you would need to know.
Is that when it solidifies?
That is when it solidifies. So oil turns into this nasty, I want to say solidifies. It's a deposit that it leaves behind. And it is, oh boy, how can I describe this deposit? It does create this solid deposit, and it's really bad. And you don't want this. And it's going to happen in two places on the aircraft engine that we don't want it to happen on. And why we're bringing it up now is because the first place it happens is in the exhaust guides. Because what are the exhaust guide temperatures running at? Around 1,000, and oil coke's at?
300.
That's Celsius. So I was talking Fahrenheit, so 575. So we have oil that sits inside the guide. And the guide is 1,000 degrees, and oil coke's at 575. So do you think the oil's going to coke in there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that creates a problem. So this is why. This is why some engines have sticking valve problems. And this is a real big deal, and it happens often. So the coke builds up, and pushes valve to one side, and pushes valve to one side. This decreases the clearance, so this decreases the clearance. What clearance am I talking about? Valve stem in guide. Okay, so clearance, clearance until no oil gets in. And valve seizes. Seizes into or onto the guide. This isn't a real big problem for Continental. And it is, I was going to say, I don't know why, but I'm going to tell you this whole story and you can figure it out. Lycoming has a constant problem with this. And so they have a service instruction whereby you're supposed to go in every 500 hours and you're actually supposed to drop the valves into the cylinder and you're supposed to measure it and you're supposed to hone out the guide. Put the valve back in. So in reality, what's happening, the guide is getting smaller and smaller and smaller as it runs until the point where it seizes up on the valve. And so you have to knock, before that happens, you knock the valve out and then ream out the guide, get all that coking out, and then put the guide, or the valve back in. So the way this presents itself is they actually call it in the field morning sickness. And what happens is you'll hear this from a pilot, and they will come and they say, well, you know, I've just been having a problem on the airplane. And I talk about your problem. So the thing is, when I start it up in the morning or whenever I'm going to go flying, it shakes really bad. It just runs so, and it used to run really smooth, and now it's just shaking, as a guy used to work, it's shaking like a dog passing a peach pit. So that's a good visual for you. So it's shaking, but then after it warms up, it starts to get better. So what's happening inside the engine? It's sticking, but why did it get better?
Because it warmed up and everything expanded.
There you go. Warms up again. So it got better. So do you have to worry about it? Nope. Then a little bit more coke builds up, and then pretty soon that valve, what happens is it's pushing the valve open under most cases, and the valve is staying open, and that's okay to a point. It's when the valve then gets stuck all the way closed, and the camshaft comes around and it pushes on the push rod pushes on the rocker arm tries to push on the valve, and the valve don't go. Something has to give. So the push rod gives, and so you, I'd like to have some, I think Larry has it, but then the push rod's all bent. No, that fixed that. So then you lose the cylinder, and that's not good. So hopefully if it does happen, it happens on the ground and not in the air. So that's the problem you have. I feel like I already said all this. I already said the exhaust valves are sodium filled, did I not? Yes, I did.
Yes.
It may have stellite added to the face and tip. I didn't say that.
Yep.
I said that? Okay, stellite. Usually has a larger stem than the intake. I think I said that. 45-degree face cut. Did I say that? Cuts carbon, allows more contact for seat. Designed to rotate. I think I said that too.
Did you say that the intake has a larger stem?
No, the exhaust has a larger stem.
Okay, that's what you wrote, but I don't think you just said that.
Oh, sorry. I was talking about the face.
Oh.
No, I don't know. Face is smaller, so whatever. Okay, so I got all that. We'll just throw this one in here then. I don't know where I'm at, so we can say let's say rotator caps. Rotator caps. Well, you noticed that in your particular engine that the keepers for the intake side are different than the keepers for the exhaust side. And there is also this funny little cap that goes on there. Well, what that funny little cap does is it unloads the spring from the valve, and so it allows the valve to rotate in there. Yeah, I could write that. So, Lycoming. Lycoming uses a rotator cap that unloads the keeper. Unloads the keeper. So it pushes down on the keeper. The keeper then pushes away from the valve. Now the valve is really not being held in by anything. It's just being pushed back down. And so because it's all unloaded from everything else, it's allowed to rotate freely. Continental has another idea. Oh, by the way, they do that on intake and exhaust on a lot of Lycoming engines. But Continental uses a thing called it's a rotator caps, what I call them, rotocoil. That's it. And I'll pass this around. But this is Continental's idea. And so it's a two-piece deal that you're supposed to push on and make sure they rotate. That's why you're supposed to replace these at overhaul because they kind of wear out. But this is the upper spring seat, and the keepers go in there, and then you can kind of see how the spring would stay put, and the valve is allowed to rotate around. So that little rotator cap you have it's doing the same thing, same idea. Continental.
Normally on the exhaust.
Continental use those on both sides. Normally, Lycoming on they use. You're going to see their roto caps, their rotator caps on the exhaust, but on bigger engines, you'll see them on both sides. Continental uses a rotocoil. All right, now I already told you about the intake valve. It's cooled by the fuel air, has a larger head than the exhaust, allows for better volumetric efficiency, and it's 30-degree phase. I said all that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Very redundant. All right, we talked about valve keepers. Talked about the circlet, right? Okay. Valve guides, we talked about those. Interference fit. We don't need to talk about that. Talked about matching the guide part number to the valve part number. Oh, put this. Valve guides. What do I do here? Valve guides. It can be a source of oil burning. And why would that be? Let's see if we can find a nice picture here. We can go with this one. We can pretend like this is an intake guide right here. And if this is an intake valve, let's find a better picture so you don't have to use too much of your imagination. What the heck? We can go with this one. Okay, so we'll say this is an intake. And so down, this is the intake then chamber. even though it's not, it's exhaust. Here's the intake chamber. So we have, when the piston comes down on the intake stroke, the intake valve is open. Okay, so it's open and it's drawing in fuel air. So this chamber right here inside the intake port, is that more than ambient or less than ambient?
Less.
It's a suction. So it's less. All right, so let's think that through. So we'll look at this one over here. So we have the intake port, which is really right here, and this, and let me think. So that's going to go with a pipe, and the pipe's going to go to an air cleaner, and at some point the throttle valve, depending on what we've got here. So we got the intake pipe. At some point we're going to have a throttle. We keep going. We're going to have an air cleaner. There's my air cleaner. All right, so this is sucking in a fuel air mixture, and that means that this is a lower pressure area than outside.
Okay.
Oh, okay. If the throttle valve is actually, we're going to do a lot more throttle valves later. If it's actually closed because it's at idle, this is a serious vacuum that's happening up in here.
Is that
And-
why, like, when like you're idling, your suction gauge drop?
No, your suction gauge in your aircraft is run off a vacuum pump. So it's a separate pump. And it's because your pump's not turning fast enough. So that's a whole nother thing. So, all right, so at idle with the throttle valve closed, this piston's coming down. It's trying to draw in air, and I've got this valve right here that's closed, and so it's blocking off air from getting into the cylinder. That's what idle is all about. All right, and even then when I go to full throttle, depending on what kind of system I have, especially if it's like a carburetor, not a Continental, Continental or Lycoming, I may have a venturi, right, which is a choked off point, which measures air coming through. So I've got all these things working against me, air trying to get through. So that means that as this is pulling down, creates a suction. I have a suction inside of here, and a suction means that it's less than the air around. If I have any sort of leak around my gaskets, around the intake system, it's most noticeable at idle, because that's when the pressure difference between the outside air and what's going into that intake pipe, that's when they're the biggest difference. Right? So if you do have an intake leak, let's say we had a hole that it worked itself right here. That's a big hole, isn't it? We have a little hole that worked itself into this right here. A bad gasket, something wore a hole. A little hole right there. At idle, it would be extremely noticeable because we have got the throttle valve closed and it's trying to suck air as best it can. And so it's going to look for air anywhere it can. It's going to pull this air in here, right? We go to wide open throttle, max throttle, and this hole is going to become less effective. It's not really going to notice it as much because the air inside of this tube, because the throttle is wide open, the air gets much closer to the air that's outside. So if you don't have that much of a difference, you don't suck in a lot of air. I hope everybody can see that because it's a really important point. All right, if you don't get that, just this is not one of those. It probably won't matter. You gonna wake up? Okay. Okay, so I'm talking about intake, induction leaks. Induction is another word for the intake pipe system. And what we're going to talk about next 8-week segment is all about the fuel measuring systems. And that's where we're going to get into throttle valves and venturis and stuff like that. But for now, what you need to understand is that there are restrictions in this pipe going into the cylinder. There's an air filter restriction. There's often a venturi. A venturi is something that closes off a passage. And it increases the velocity of air, but it creates a low pressure area. There's the valve that controls the air going to the cylinder. That is your right foot on your car is controlling a valve. That's all it does in your car, in a computer.
Where is carburetor?
Huh?
Where is carburetor?
It's right there.
Doesn't have one. It's fuel injected.
Yeah.
Carburetor's right here,
Uh-huh.
but it's not. It's fuel injected. So just work with me.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to confuse him. I already did. Okay, so at idle, the throttle valve is mostly closed, letting very little fuel and air past it. That's why the engine doesn't run fast. That's why it runs slow. When you step on the gas in your car, it opens up the throttle. and it allows more fuel and more air to run into the engine. That's why it goes faster. Everybody follow? All right. So back to idle. So at idle, this engine is trying to run. It's really trying to go somewhere. It's like engines, they want to go faster. But it can't. That piston's coming down and it's trying to suck in as much air as it possibly can, but I've closed all the air ports off and I'm only having a little tiny bit of air. So, but that piston went down and it's got a displacement. So think about a syringe, right? A giant syringe. And if you pull it back, what's it want to do? It sucks in the air, right? But if you put your thumb over the end and pull it back, let it go, it goes back the other way. I don't know. What else does that? All right. So at idle, inside of this intake tube is a vacuum. It is a lot of suction. If you put a little hole right there, you're going to hear air being sucked into it. If you put your finger over it, it's going to suck your skin right in that little thing right there because it's a vacuum. Keep saying that. Must be true. So you got a vacuum. So at this vacuum, right in here is a very low pressure. This is very low at idle. But out here it's normal. It's the air we have around us, right? It's technically 14.7 psi, but we'll call it 0 because it's a reference. So we have regular pressure here and a vacuum here. Just like when you plug in the vacuum. Well, you guys know vacuum, do you? But you vacuum your car out, right? So you got a vacuum. But as that throttle valve opens up and we go towards full throttle, we get rid of these restrictions. More air is allowed to come through here. So that means the pressure that's in here gets very close to what is around us. So if it's almost the same as out here, it doesn't suck in a bunch of air. Follow? Okay. So that's why I say the part in here, the air in here at idle is a vacuum at idle. And so any sort of leak is going to be worse at what? Idle or full throttle? Idle. Vacuum. So if somebody said, if they have a problem, the aircraft isn't running well at idle. And so the first thing is, well, does it get better when it warms up? Nope. It just doesn't idle worth a crap. What's the first thing you would think? Got an air leak somewhere. Bad gasket, a hole somewhere. Sorry, I laugh because now I remember a story. It's a terrible story. But I will tell you this. The worst thing you can do to an aircraft engine, if you can't fly it, is to go to the airport and start it up and run it, and then just shut it down. Well, at least I ran it for a while. And we'll talk about that with next week with oil, but I'll tell you now. So what it does is it doesn't bake the water out of the oil. All it does is warms the air up inside the crankcase. So it expands the air goes out, and then when the engine cools, it brings in more air and more moisture. And that moisture goes in and soaks the oil and the parts, and then you come and run it again, and then you just blow out that dry air and suck in some more wet air and give it more moisture. You're constantly feeding the moisture. But anyway, so we had this, it was really foggy, and we had a customer. I wasn't really a customer. It was just a guy at the airport. I could see him from the shop out there. And I remember he came and he was just doing that. And he was running it. It sounded so bad. It was awful. And he comes walking the shop. Oh, my airplane sounds really bad. And the other guy goes, well, you're not running it very well. Run the crap out of it. Lean it out. Just really, you got to go. You just got some bad plugs probably. Just hammer it hard. And that guy, he was out there just killing this engine. And he'd pull it back to idle and snort and pop and wouldn't idle. And he'd do it some more. And I think he did it for the whole day, And it's like, it never got better. And so finally he came in. He's like, well, I guess that's not going to help. So I guess if you guys could take a look at it. So I don't know. I remember I had to look at it or somebody else, but it pulled the cowling off. And what had happened, he had an exhaust leak. And so you have intake pipes and they have a rubber coupler. And so the exhaust had blown a hole through the rubber coupler. And so there was this gigantic air leak with exhaust going right into it. So you can run it all damn day. It's not going to do anything. It was not going to help. So, all right, so I'm telling you about this low pressure area because it's really going to matter, especially in the next 8-week class. And I want to tell you that, so if we go back and we look at this over here, and now we're going to pretend like this is our intake chamber. what kind of pressure do we have inside of the intake chamber? Low pressure. Vacuum? Okay, we'll say vacuum. What kind of pressure do we have outside of it? Regular. If we fill this up full of oil, and this is vacuum right here, and we have room between the guide and the stem, it sucks oil in. So if this is the intake, it is going to suck oil right down that guide, across this valve, and into the chamber right there, and you burn oil.
How would oil get?
It's not blow-by. Blow-by is by rings.
Yeah, how does oil get up to the vacuum shaft and stuff?
It's supposed to be the rocker head in the oil.
Well, wait a minute. You telling me that there's no oil up here?
I would think so, but.
How long is that going to work?
Well, no, I wouldn't think there wouldn't be. Okay, there should be oil up here, of course, but how?
With the exception of only one engine that I'm aware of, and that would be the Lycoming 0290D.
That's what I was. Oh my god.
All of the other engines have pressure oil up there. The 290D does not have pressure oil. They have a goofy system. So all the other ones, you have an oil gallery, which is in the case, and that's the tube that has oil pressure. It goes from the oil pump. It's going to go suck it up into the oil pump. Oil pump's going to push it out to a spot where it has a choice. It's either going to go through the oil pressure relief valve and back to the sump or into the oil gallery. All right, so excess pressure is bled out. So it feeds into the oil gallery. This is all engines, except that one. And the oil gallery has little holes that are lined up right along the line with your tappets. So it's going to pressurize the inside of the tappets, which are hydraulic tappets. We'll talk about that, I don't know, soon. And it inflates the hydraulic tappets, and then it takes that pressure oil and sends it right down the middle of the push rod up to the rocker arm. And then from there, it's either going to do, it depends on the engine, it will either pressure oil the bushing and the rocker arm and then spray it onto the valve, or it will drip out and go into a little hole and around. So it's pressure fed.
I was real curious about that.
All right, so I tell you all that to tell you that Continental, on all their bigger engines, probably somewhere in the mid 90s, which was before MJ was born, apparently. Well, you always say that.
I said it once. I'm 99.
You said it a lot. All right, so you're Katie's age. All right, so they put seals on all their intake guides, and they were taller. And we actually had a tool that you just cut down the guide and put the seal on. Now they just have short guides, and you still put the seals on. So they all have intake seals. So I guess that was a very long way of saying it can be a source of oil burning, and I can say Continental uses intake guide seals. So if you had a Continental and somebody says it's burning a lot of oil, well, maybe the seals are going bad. I don't see that very often, but.
Are those like rubber boots of some sort?
Mhm. All right, we talked about morning sickness. I'll just put that morning sickness. Morning sickness, and that's usually the exhaust valve. All right, valve seats. Pretty much told you most of the stuff you need about valve seats. When do we change them?
Condition.
On condition. What kind of fit are they?
Interference.
There we go. We already said that, right? Okay. Yes.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Interference fit. Interference fit. Change when worn. When worn. May have an interference angle. which means the angle on the seat is off by anywhere from 1/4 to 1 degree. But I will tell you this, the machinery that you actually use, even the best of stuff, is off by that much. So it's going to be that way anyway. All right. You ever heard of the 3-angle cut valves? What do you think about that?
I had it done.
So you paid money to have it done?
Yeah.
Okay. I do it all the time. I did it all the time. All right. So let me see. Some seats have 3-angle cuts. The theory behind that is it provides a better gas flow. I know that some of the intake seats, especially Lycoming, they actually have a Venturi seat where it's funny, they have the seats are rounded on the inside and creates a little Venturi, which increases velocity, also decreases the pressure. So they say the 3-angle cuts have a better gas flow. I'm just going to tell you this, so we'll take a look at a seat. So here is, I'll make it red. So here I have a seat, and what kind of seat did I make there? Is it intake or exhaust?
Exhaust.
How do you know?
45.
There you go, thank you. So it's 45 degrees. So we're just going to look at 1/2 of one. And I've got my valve. So I've got my margin, and I got my valve is going to sit here. All right, can everybody see that? So there we go. There we've got it sitting there. What's that?
Sit upside down.
Yeah.
It is, but
Right side down.
Okay, where's the head of the valve?
I work on them upside down, so that's how I think of them. So this is the head right here.
Okay.
So the piston's going to be going this way up here. So yes, it is upside down, but that's the way I work on them, so I guess that's the way I think about them without thinking much about them. So, okay. So what I've got here, you can see that the seat, well, I'm going to do this. So if I had a seat, my valve seat came all the way like that, I've got contact, excuse me, I have contact from this point all the way to this point, right? Okay, that's not the way it works. You don't want too much contact. What happens if I get too much contact? Nope.
Particles
You
will
cool
cause
the
it
valve.
not to seat.
He's already had this before. So what? Say it again. Help him out.
Particles will cause it not to seat.
Okay, so the wider the seat, the less pressure is there. If I have only a little bit of pressure and I get, sorry, a little booger like I have in my throat or something. That was disgusting. I ate peanuts before I came out here.
You blame everything on me.
Guy's trying to make me healthy, brings me good healthy food, and kick him when he's
I'm
down.
almost like a half dietitian.
I know he is. That's it. He's my dietitian. You guys see my V8 juice I have now? Starting to really like that stuff. All right. All right. If I can keep from choking on my own, whatever. Okay. So if the seat is too wide, that's bad because we don't have enough pressure. So you want your seat to be on the valve. I always liked them to be about the 2/3 area, or, sorry, 1/3, about this area right here. Close to the margin, but not all the way touching the margin and not all the way back here by the stem. Just for MJ, I've got to put the stem. Stem's going to come over here. There we go. Is that better? All right. Everybody's like, oh, now I see what you drew. All right, but it's only 1/2 of one. So I want my seat to be up here. Now, the way I can tell exactly how much seating area I have is you're going to do something called lapping the valves. And what you do is you take lapping compound, I'm glad I have a valve, and you put a little lapping compound around here like that, and you put it in the valve. You put it in the, what's that thing called? Cylinder. So it's going to be in the cylinder, and you're looking down the cylinder, because I work on everything upside down, and you're going to have this suction cup thing, and you put it on there, right? And then you have this tool, and it's going down, it's hitting the valve, and you're going to go like that. And you're going to move the valve back and forth. I'm going to show you how to do it. And so you have that valve going back and forth on the seat with lapping compound, which is an abrasive compound. It's like toothpaste, but more. And so it's going to lap inside that seat, and I'm going to pull it out, and I'm going to wipe it off, and I can look, and it'll be a frosted gray line exactly where it's touching the seat. And the seat will have a frosted line on it where it was touching the valve. So I can see how wide it's touching here, and then I can look down there and see how well it's touching. Follow? Okay. And if it's too wide, I have a problem. So let's say I lapped it in and I've got, I'll use green to represent, and I've got this really wide seat. What's my problem? Because it's an exhaust seat, this is a problem. Not enough what?
Pressure.
Not enough pressure. Well, let me ask you this. So I've got to fix it, and I'll show you how in a minute, but would I want to have a very, very thin line so that the pressure is really high?
No.
Why not?
Feather edge.
Nah, feather edge is up here.
Less contact areas for heat transfer.
There you go, less contact for heat area. Feather edge is when I start getting rid of this up here. Feather edge is when you get rid of the margin. So that means that I've ground the valve too much. See right here, I've got a nice margin right there. I got all that. Feather edge is when it looks like that. There's no margin here. It just comes right, it gets really sharp. All right, so I got to fix this. What did I cut the seat with to begin with? Well, let's just say it was 45 degrees, right? So I do a thing called topping it. I want to top it. And so if I take a stone and I put it in there that is 30 degrees, that 30-degree stone is going to sit in here like so, and it's going to cut the top right off. Can you see that, hopefully? All right. And so what happens is it cuts away part of the top. And then if I use a 15, that'd be 60-degree stone, down here, that stone is going to be very, I don't know, it's be narrow, but it's going to fit in here in such a way that's kind of like fitting in like this. Instead of being at 45, it's going to have that angle, and that is going to cut the bottom right off. So that's how I fix that. So it ends up looking a little bit more like this. So we got 3 angles. 1, 2, 3. So there's a 3-angle seat. And where did I bring my touching to? Right in there. So that's where it's going to hit the valve. So I call that topping it up here and bottoming it here. Do the same thing on intakes. If I had an intake, let's put that over here. Got to do 30. So that's 30. Hopefully I did that right. If I top it, I can top it with a 15 and bottom it with a 45. So when I do that, it cuts that off, makes it very shallow here, makes this very steep right there. My angles aren't right. Sorry about that. But anyway, do you get the idea? Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to talk to you about and show you when we're doing that stuff on the cylinder line. So that's the three-angle valves that people talk, or 3-angle seats that people talk about. So some people say that increases the volumetric efficiency. I say it just fixes where your valve was. All right. I did tell you that seats can be Allison or straight. Allison or straight. Remember that, Steve?
Yep.
Okay.
Like the L thing, yeah.
Valve springs. Valve springs. What do valve springs do? They close the valve. Oh, we don't need to write this down. Valve operates at about 20 to 30 times a second. So intake valve opens 1 time per 720 degrees. If engine running is 2,600 RPM, then the valve opens 1,300 times a minute. Yeah.
I'm surprised there's enough time for rotation.
Well, that's what I'm talking. I know, but it just rotates a little tiny bit, and that's what I'm talking about when we start. We're always doing things so slow. You know, we talk about it's an intake stroke, but when we're talking about a valve that's actually what I say, opening and closing 1,300 times a minute. What is that? I don't know. A minute. You can do whatever that is a second. Oh, I just told you, 20, 30 times a second. Then things are happening very quickly, right? And so that's why I say there's not enough time to get the air and stuff like that in. But let's see, keeps valve closed when not open. So yeah, valve spring closes the valve, and it also keeps it closed when it's not being forced open. Try and cut some of this out. Usually sets of 2 or 3 springs. The bottom is wound tighter than the top. Have you noticed that? There is an absolute definite bottom and an absolute definite top to the springs. It's really difficult to just grab a spring and look at it, but there's a simple little trick, and I have to have one in my hands to show you the trick. And once I show you the trick, you're like, oh, how could you not see that? But I'll do that. So the bottom is on top of the top. That is called a progressive or dampened wound spring. Not all springs are that way. Most of them are progressive or dampened spring. Why are there multiple valves? Sorry, that was a really bad. Yeah, because you got to have one for the intake and one for the exhaust. That would be the answer to that question. Why are there multiple springs?
Spring surge.
What is spring surge?
It's the resonant frequency of the spring itself when it operates at the same, or when the engine operates at the resonant frequency of the spring. It like causes it to become, cause it to not work anymore.
Prevents valve bounce.
Valve bounce, valve float. All right, so what that is, all right, so first of all, resonance is absolutely 100% correct. Also, valve float or bounce. So what that is this valve is supposed to be forced open and closed, and it's going to follow the cam lobe. We'll talk about cams a little bit. So but if the springs are too weak, it's kind of like bouncing it. And so if you hit it enough, it just kind of wants to stay open. Nothing's forcing it back down. So it just kind of stays bouncing in this little area, even though the rocker arm is no longer trying to push it up. The rocker arm went away, but it's because it hit it enough to bounce it up. It'll stay up and just kind of float in that little area. So that's valve float or valve bounce. I guess I could tell you this story. You're not going to give me a bad time about it.
I like it when you give stories.
Okay. I can't believe this is the second time I'm telling this story today, but it's a great story. And you probably already know where it's headed. So I had a customer who had a Cessna 140. A very nice one. So it was a Cessna 140. Cessna 140 came with a Continental C85 engine. Right? But this particular owner had an STC and put it Continental 0200. So it went from 85 to 100 horsepower. And I was doing the annual inspection, and I found one of the cylinders was bad. I had a bad valve leak or something like that. And so I took off the cylinder, and I didn't take off the cylinder. I was busy, so I asked the guy in the cylinder shop, and he took off the cylinder, and he overhauled the cylinder, and he put the cylinder back on. And I did the annual inspection. And the customer, and I did the run up, and the aircraft ran beautifully. I did a lot of work to the airplane. I like that plane. And he came and got it, and he called me up, and he said, "This thing runs terrible." "It doesn't run terrible. It runs great." He said, No, when I fly it, it shakes really bad. I said, "Well, bring it back." So he brought it back, and man, I troubleshot everything. I'm like, is it a Crossfire or something? One of the leads breaking down, and it's not, because leads will do that. They'll break down and they'll arc instead of to the spark plug. They'll arc over to ground somewhere outside of it. And so I troubleshot that to the point where I just couldn't, figure it out. And so I ended up placing an ignition harness, and he'd fly it, and it still doesn't. I'm like, thanks. Look at the magnetos, and look, it took those off, and that didn't do it. And it looked something else, and that didn't do it. It's just really just, not really just troubleshooting everything. It's like, just spending so much time and effort on this. I can't keep just throwing stuff at it, but everything had a reason why I changed it. And so out of desperation, I walk in the cylinder shop, and I'm like, dang, I just sat down. I'm like, I'm just so frustrated with this airplane. I cannot figure out what is wrong with it. It runs perfect on the ground, flawless. The guy takes it up in the air, and he runs like crap. And in fact, at one point, I said, man, I don't believe you. take me for a flight. So I went for the flight with this guy, and he gets to an RPM. This thing just starts shaking. I'm like, whoa, okay, stay. Don't do that. Let's go home. You know, this thing's not safe. He goes, that's what I was telling you. I'm like, well, you are absolutely right. So, you know, I'm sitting there in the cylinder shop. I just can't figure out what's wrong with this stupid O200. You got to help me out. What's wrong with my O200? And the cylinder shop guy said, well, first of all, it's not an O200. It's an 85. It's a Cessna 140. They never came with O200s. I said, no, it's an O200. He's like, oh, dude, I am so sorry. He goes, I thought it was a C85. I built up a C85 cylinder for you. The only difference between a C85 cylinder and an O200, he kept the same piston, so that wasn't the problem. The O200 has 3 valve springs, and the C85 has 2. And 2 of them, they're the same part number. You just add a third. And that caused that whole problem. Yep, valve springs. It was missing.
That had to be annoying.
At that point, I was so thankful that, number one, I didn't cause it. Number two, I finally figured out what the problem was.
And it wasn't something catastrophic.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, all that work is driving you mad for extra
For like a week or
time.
two,
It's
yeah.
One spring. It's like you.
Yeah, but you know what? You learn something like that, and you never forget.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, number one,
Right.
don't assume. You know, number two, have checks and balances, and you know,
Yeah.
because.
We're gonna put that spring on and grab the beer, my friend.
All right. Are we still recording here? I don't know. Yes, we are. Okay. So don't know what happened there. I just accidentally clicked it. All right. So now you know about valve float and all that stuff. And I got to try and shorten this up a little bit. Of course, it's held in by the lower spring seats and the upper spring seats. That's what those are called, lower. Well, I better do it. A, B, C, D. Held in place by upper and lower spring seats. The lower spring seats are the things that you like to lose in the washer, the parts washer. All right. The lower spring seats in most circumstances are all the same. The uppers are usually different because the valves are different sizes and therefore the keepers are different sizes. That brings me to the valve train. Wish I had a toot toot. Wish I had some sort of sound effects. That would just make this like a morning show up here. Right? All right, if we're going to talk about the valve train, I guess we can look at some pictures of the valve train. Okay, we talked about that. All right, we're doing pretty well here. All right. There's my valve train. All right. This is what? This is a modern day Lycoming camshaft. What is different about this than yours?
Solid piece, solid piece.
That is a one-piece deal. What is the business with all this copper color here? Isn't that kind of cool?
Not dry.
It's what? Come on, you should all know. Why is that colored copper there?
It's not dry.
Nitride resist.
Nitride. They nitrided this, but what do you put on to prevent something from getting nitrided? Copper. So now you can look at this brand new camshaft and know that everything that is shiny is nitrided. Everything that is gold is not, or copper. All right, so we have a cam shaft as opposed to a cam ring. This is a tappet. This is a solid, flat tappet. These are roller tappets. So this is becoming more of an industry standard, finally. Radial engines have been using these since the day they made radial engines. They've always had roller tappets. I don't think they have anything but roller tappets. But opposed engines have always used the flat ones, and now we're starting to get into using that. So the cam rides against the tappet, either the roller or the flat. That pushes against the push rod, and the push rod pushes against the rocker arm. All right, and this is a hydraulic unit that would fit up inside of one of these if you had hydraulic tappets. All right, so what kind of engine is this? It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lobes.
Four-cylinder.
It's 4 cylinders.
Could it be a dual cam?
Because one of the valves are shared. I don't know which one.
The intakes, and I don't know why this is. And I've never read it. I just read it or just noticed it. The intakes share a lobe, and the exhausts get their own. It's just the way the cylinders are lined up in there. All right, there we go. So this is a big old Continental style camshaft, and it uses hydraulic lifters that are much different. How do you get these out of the crankcase?
Hey, you drop them when you pull the case apart.
You just split. Well, you drop them when you pull the case apart. That's right. That's how they come out. You just drop them. All right. By the way, Lycoming, this goes up at the top. That's why it's up at the top. And this goes down at the bottom on a Continental. So this is a big Continental 6-cylinder with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, I must have miscounted somewhere. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nope, 9. It's actually I'd be right. 9 lobes for 12 cylinders. All right, but they use more of an automotive style hydraulic lifters. And this is just, as Phil would say, kind of gee whiz information. Notice the thickness of this black stripe versus the thickness of this black stripe. These are high flow lifters, and these are low flow. That's why they're labeled exhaust. And it has to do with the bleed down rate. So these don't bleed down as fast, which means it doesn't pump as much oil down the pushrod tube, which means that rocker arm doesn't get as much oil. This one bleeds down faster, which means oil goes down the pushrod tube much faster, which means that the rocker arm on the exhaust side gets a lot more oil. What do you suppose that's all about? Oil cools, heat, and you don't want oil being sucked up in the intake guides. So limit it up here, add it down here. That's, you don't have to do that. All right, there's our tappets. You got hydraulic roller tappets. You got hyperbolic. You got spherical, has a little dome right there, and straight body. What kind do you guys have? Straight body. Straight body solid, actually. Straight body. Yep, solid. Hey, it even says that, solid. Asterisk, do not interchange with roller tappets. Can't just throw them in there. All right, we can come around to that. But I think I've got to let you go pee-pee.